The Goldilocks zone tells you where life might appear, but that is not the same question as where you can live. As a settler, collecting your energy, creating a breathable atmosphere and recycling your water, your habitable zone is much wider. And if you get it wrong and pick your destination based on the traditional definition, you may miss the best site. Today we intend to talk about the Goldilocks zone. And as research for that, I have read the original story, which is not named Goldilocks, and the woman getting into the house is much less nice than in the child story that we have now. But the three bears are gone and they have made their porridge. So the first part of the Goldilocks story is that she tastes the big bear's porridge and it's too hot. And then she tastes the mama bear's porridge and it's too cold. And then she tastes the little bear's porridge and that is just right. So porridge should be the right temperature is part of the criteria for a good place to live. The second part is that she gets a bit tired and tries to chairs. Why she's not sitting in chairs when eating, I don't know, but she tries to chairs after having finished the porridge. And she starts by the big Papa Bear's chair, which is too hard. And then she tries Mama Bear's chair, which is too soft. And then she tries the little bear's chair, which is just right until it breaks suddenly. And then she's still tired, partly because the chair broke, and it goes up the stairs into the bedroom, and she tries the beds, and she tries Papa Bear's bed, which is too high at the head in the original story. And then she tries Mama Bear's bed, which is too high at the feet. And then she tries Little Bear's bed, which is just right, and she falls asleep immediately. And then the bears come home and she jumps out through the window as in the original story, except there is some discussion on whether she was caught and arrested and put in prison.
Or eaten, because they are bears.
No, it's not. No, they are very nice bears. They don't eat
Oh,
people, even in the original story.
well,
She,
that's less
she,
interesting.
yes, that could have been interesting indeed. Okay, so, but we're talking about Goldilocks zone in the solar system or in any solar system. So, what are the conditions for life?
Right. And, for the science community, Goldilocks zone is primarily means liquid water on the surface, right? Because that kind of folds in temperature, because you got to be in a certain temperature range for that
Yep,
too. So, um,
that
yeah,
gives porridge.
what's that?
That gives porridge
Yes.
that you can eat.
So, yeah, that is the traditional Goldilocks zone is it in a temperature band that there can be liquid water? And I don't know if there's a time determinant, like is it permanent liquid water? Is it liquid water for part of the year? Depending on an orbit, if it has an eccentric orbit, a planet could be close enough that it would have liquid water for part of its orbit and then frozen the other part. So I don't know. I don't know what the other parameters are to make it a Goldilocks zone.
I think it is possible for a planet to go in and out of the Goldilocks zone, and whether then that calls it a Goldilocks planet, I don't know.
I don't know. I mean, most
But
planets, at least in our star system, have circular orbits for the most part. So
yeah,
they don't really dip in and out. They're pretty much in the band. But, other star systems, who knows?
Mercury has a pretty elliptic orbit actually, but
Yeah, but I don't
it's
think,
kind of inside the Goldilocks zone anyway.
well, I mean, I think it's too close in to be considered in the Goldilocks. It's too hot for out to have liquid water.
Yes,
So
but
even
then
at
again,
its furthest point, I don't think it's hits the Goldilocks zone.
yes. But I think for settling, I think the Goldilocks zone is too narrowly defined because as a settler, you don't need the water to be liquid. You need it to be there, and you need to have a part of the planet that is high enough temperature so that, well, you can stay there without excessive heating arrangements.
Yeah,
Ice is
I
fine.
mean, if I agree, I think that there's too much of a planetary bias, especially when people talk about settlement. Um, and if you have a planetary bias, of course, you need to have a habitable life support system. So you need liquid water, enough atmospheric pressure, preferably something you can breathe, right? But if you take away those, I would say the Goldilocks zone then becomes much more nebulous. Because what if you're talking about orbital habitats, orbital settlements? You know, where is there? Is maybe temperature might be one of the boundaries, like an inner boundary. Like if they get too close to the sun, they might require too much infrastructure
Yeah.
to withstand the temperature.
Yeah. And getting too far from the sun, you don't have the energy to melt the water. So
Well,
you don't get the porridge anyway.
well, I mean that's another whole issue with the Goldilocks zone. If you define it by solar energy input, then Mars is pretty much the outer band, right,
Yes,
for solar energy input. Um,
it is. And I'm get a bit annoyed with the Martians, well, the people propagating for Mars to be colonized. That they keep saying that, and we can use solar panels as if they have the same output as on Earth. They have much less output. I think it's a third.
Yeah, I think I read a quarter, something close. Well, so let's just say
Yeah,
somewhere between a third and a quarter. But
yeah,
then you also got to throw in, month-long dust storms, which will completely block out the sun.
I think Martian dust storms is a bit over exaggerated. The atmosphere is rather tenuous.
Oh, I think it's exaggerated for like the wind factor, but it's
Yeah.
not exaggerated for blotting out the sun
Okay.
because unexpected dust storms nearly took out several of the rovers
Mm,
because they just could not recharge their batteries over months. Plus the fact
yeah.
that, the dust lands on the solar panels and then somebody's got to go off and brush those off.
You need to go out and swipe with the car.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, so that's another whole problem for the Martians is that yes, they get a lot less input from the sun and it can be blotted out for months at a time by planet-wide dust storms.
Yeah.
But not and the fact that for half of the day it's night. So
Indeed.
they get a lot less solar than I think most people think about for Mars.
I think most people just think that there is sunshine on the Mars, so it's the same as Earth, which
Right.
it isn't.
Their day is 25-ish hours.
Okay, it's the
So they
same.
get
Same,
about the
same.
same day and night.
Yeah. The worse on Mercury. They have 6 months day and three
Mercury
months
would
and 3 months year. So that's a bit funny.
Mercury would be an interesting place to try to settle because yeah, you I mean it's bad enough on the moon, right, where you got 14 days of darkness.
Yeah,
6 months, that's a hell of an energy storage system.
it is.
Yeah.
Or transport if you put put it around one of the poles or something in a circle.
Yeah, and again, that's mega engineering, just trying to figure out how
It
a
is.
single
It
settlement would
is.
survive.
And keep repairing it when the meteorite hits somewhere. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think for Mercury, it would either be nuclear or beamed energy from orbital solar plants.
Or um, uh, solar thermal. It is the place in the solar system which has the largest variation in temperature.
Yeah, but when
But
you're 3 months into your 6 months of darkness, you may have already hit some kind of thermal equilibrium.
then it's cold outside. So you need to store enough energy to handle that.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, we're still struggling to do the whole 14 days of darkness on the moon. I don't know if we're ready to figure out the energy storage for a Mercury settlement.
Temperature may be the solution, actually. Temperature isn't that difficult to store. And if you have enough storage medium to heat it up in the daytime and cool it down in the nighttime, that might work. I haven't done the calculations though.
Well, it might work on the moon. I'm not sold that it'll work for 6 months.
It's higher variations. It's just that you need bigger storage there. It's easier to get power out of it. On the moon, you can. On Earth, you can't really, or rather, very special conditions, and if you have large quantities of the media like oceans.
Right. Well, yeah, because then, for the Earth, that's like the ocean thermal energy conversion systems, right?
Uh,
So, but yeah, hard to do that on the moon or anywhere else. But going back to the Goldilocks thing, um,
yes.
I think that it depends on what you're looking for. Like we said, if we're looking for liquid water, that defines one band. If we're looking for energy, that defines another. If we're looking for temperature, yet another. I think you could even say if you're looking for accessible resources, then your band is going to be out by the asteroid belt, maybe, or
Don't, yeah, I don't think we can include resources in a Goldilocks zone band because that's more of a
sure you can. If you are a space-based
movable.
civilization and you don't want to go into a gravity well, then the inner planets are really not good for resource extraction, right? You'll have the limited number of asteroids that are near Earth, the
Uh,
Apollo, the Atens, the Amor.
there is a fair number of tons there, but yeah, it is
Well,
limited. Yep.
limited compared to the actual asteroid belt. So I'm just saying, if you're looking at accessible resources without having to go into a deep gravity well, then your Goldilocks zone moves out towards where you're going to find a lot of smaller rocky or metal bodies.
Yes, but then again, then we are talking about a space in space settlement. It's not a planetary body or any type of body really. Because you're building it, so then you can choose where to build it and move the material. And if you're not going into wells, then you just want to be decently close to the sun for the energy, and then have low energy supply of resources, and that can be arranged if you're not going into a planetary well or too close to the sun.
Well, yeah, I mean that works if you've got some kind of, I don't know, say solar civilization where, yeah, you're just moving materials and people around. It's not a big deal. But let's say you've got a group and you want to build, your own little settlement and you're not really expecting anybody to move material, then you go to where the material is. And let's say you want to start someplace like Ceres or something smaller, then, your Goldilocks zone will be determined by where you can get resources, energy, whatever.
Mm. Or you go to where there are resources, and then you throw them in the right direction, and then you go there and catch them when they arrive, because you obviously throw them on a slow, cheap
Yeah.
trajectory.
Yeah, I think we've talked about that. I am very skeptical about any government allowing anybody to just throw any materials anywhere in the solar system. I think there's going to be, if we ever get to that stage where we can easily throw material around, that's going to be highly regulated because it'd be very easy to turn that into a weapon of mass destruction.
That is, if it is easy to throw it, but it doesn't take that much energy to throw it to an in orbit point, but it does take a lot of energy if you want it to hit the Earth
Oh, I'm just saying, I think that
or
if we
wherever.
ever get to the point where we have a solar civilization, moving changing the orbit of anything substantial is probably going to be highly regulated.
I don't really think so. Yeah, you are not allowed to throw rocks at somebody else. That's one thing. But apart from that, if you accelerate a mass and then let it fly, then
Then
uh,
you have a moving large mass object just flying through the solar system. And if you get your calculations wrong,
it isn't that difficult to calculate an orbit,
well,
and that would be a Hohmann orbit essentially, but just through it slowly. A spiral orbit, I guess, not the Hohmann.
it may not be that difficult, but I can name a number of things just in space where humans have screwed up the calculations and caused problems. So it may not be difficult, but it's not hard to imagine somebody, moving a decimal place accidentally or whatever.
No, something going to a different place than intended is one thing, but hitting something else, that's extremely unlikely
Super easy.
regardless.
Super easy. If I've got a mass driver, on Deimos and I'm throwing stuff to the moon, it's very easy just to be like, I'm going to shift it just a little bit, and whoa, I was hitting Earth.
Mm,
Super easy.
yeah, yeah, if you want to, but
Oh,
it's difficult to do
humans are
it by
pretty
mistake.
awful. Humans are pretty awful. I would imagine that somebody would want to.
Okay, fair enough.
I'm just saying, I think the whole, oh, we'll just be able to throw large amounts of mass around the solar system is probably not going to happen because that'll be a highly regulated activity.
Mm, yeah, right. I disagree with that, but
Okay.
let's leave it at that. So I think we have covered the porridge, comfortable chairs. That might mean atmosphere. Let's put atmosphere in the chairs. They are hard or soft. Atmosphere is nice to have, but if it is frozen, then you can thaw it, so it doesn't really matter.
If you have a planetary bias, an atmosphere is nice.
I think an atmosphere is nice because I like my several times per minute breathing habit. I want to
Sure.
keep that.
If you have a planetary bias, if you have to have settlements on the surface, then yeah, an atmosphere, a specific type of atmosphere, because you don't want something that's corrosive
Uh,
or super high pressure or flammable, or so you want an atmosphere that's not going to kill you immediately.
yeah, well, I want an atmosphere. I don't necessarily want it to cover the entire planet or moon or whatever I
Oh,
live
but
on.
see, but you're talking
But
now about what's inside the settlement. We're talking about the
yes,
Goldilocks zone. So,
yes. So yes, I was going to come to that, and then I agree. But the Goldilocks zone is what is available on site, really. So that might be resources rather than a specific gas in most cases. If we're gonna do settling, we want to have oxygen and nitrogen and some carbon dioxide, as we discussed the other day.
well, I mean, yeah, I mean that would be ideal, right? Oh, look, we've got a place where we can extract all the necessary stuff we need.
Well, regardless of where you are, you will need oxygen, carbon, and nitrogen. So whether you then choose to put it in the atmosphere or the gas you breathe or not, you could save some storage of it if you don't. But I think you would prefer to have all these three available.
Well, if that is one of the requirements of your Goldilocks zone, that you have all the resources that you need to survive, well, then it's not a zone, then it's just individual things. There's the Earth, maybe Mars. That's about
Possibility
it.
with it. Yeah, and otherwise you might need to put a couple of celestial bodies together to form a Goldilocks resource point. And then you have the beds, which is head high or head low. That's obviously gravity difference. And it would be nice to have Earth-like or perhaps slightly lower gravity, of course. But then that's pretty easy to get in orbit. You just spin it.
Well, we say it's pretty easy to do. We have never done it. I'm sure that there will be hitches along the way. So
Mm,
theoretically, yes, it would be easy to do.
I have been in a carousel, and that's sort of they spin spacecraft all the time. Okay, maybe not enough, and not with the purpose of creating gravity, but to even out the temperature variations.
Uh, it goes back to a lot of the other technology. We have a lot of theoretical ideas until we're actually, bending metal and turning bolts. It'll be
Uh,
harder than we think it is when we're actually out there in orbit somewhere trying to spin up a large settlement.
I disagree on that as
Okay,
well.
well,
I think that that's too close to fundamental principles to be difficult. You
all right.
just spin it and it keeps spinning.
Well, I hope you are absolutely correct. And I will be the first one to say you were right. But until we actually do it, it's just a big question mark. But
I
the
think
point is with gravity, if you're going to have an orbital settlement, then why would you care about anything in a deep gravity well, right? That goes back to your Goldilocks zone if you're using orbital settlements is resources with minimal gravity. So you
uh,
wouldn't build an orbital settlement in orbit around Mars because why would you fight through that gravity well all the time?
could be for resources on Phobos and Deimos, but yeah,
But Phobos and Deimos have almost no gravity, right? So if you're
uh,
going to mine that out, maybe you'd put your settlement there. So you wouldn't need an orbital one.
yeah,
Maybe. I don't know.
more difficult to spin those up, especially if you want to mine them in the meantime, because then you have down is suddenly up, which is a bit awkward if you drop something.
Well, you wouldn't have to spin up the whole thing, right? You'd again, we don't know what the gravity requirements are for humans, right? We know that microgravity sucks, and we know that more than 1 g is
Yeah.
uncomfortable. And beyond that, we really don't know what the long-term gravity requirements for humans, especially with reproduction,
Yeah, I
is.
do agree. I do agree on you with this point. Yeah, we have no clue, and it's not just humans. There is. I don't know if there is any decently large scale animals.
I think they did one in the International Space Station with mice a year or
Okay,
two, a couple of years ago.
did they survive?
No idea. I haven't seen the paper on it. I
Okay,
just know that they did it.
okay. I need to look that up, I think.
So it's like a single data point for a very small experiment with one species. So it doesn't really help. But yeah, so we don't know. There's two things, right? There's long-term survival for humans, and then there's reproduction. And they could be two different numbers for that, right? Like
Yeah,
humans might be fine in lunar gravity once they're adults, but for
yeah.
reproduction, it might need more
Spin,
acceleration.
spin it up during the honeymoon and for the first 3 years of the kid. Yeah,
Yeah, maybe. Or, maybe we have orbital nurseries and stuff where pregnant
you
women can
can.
go and
I mean,
stay
if
and then deliver, and then they raise the kids until some determined point, and then now you're an adult and they kick you off.
then again, if you're on the surface of a too light planet, you can construct carousels and sleep in those.
You can, and again, we would have to determine how much time, maybe you need six
Yeah,
hours a day in 1G and you're good.
yeah,
Or, maybe you actually need close to 24 hours. We don't know any of that stuff, but yeah.
yeah. So I think we're pretty much in agreement that Goldilocks zone is about temperature to some extent, but humans are pretty good at heating things up, so we can probably go colder. Problem with colder is that we need some other source of energy than solar, because if it's cold, then we're far from the sun. So it kind of want to have something. We prefer to have something at the right distance from an energy source, such as the sun. And then we need resources to make the porridge and the chairs, and that needs to be varied bunch of resources nearby, which is not usually included in the Goldilocks zone, but we still need it. And then we have gravity, which we can't be in too high gravity, I'm pretty sure. Well, we'll be squashed actually, so it's not possible. But there's really no such thing as too low gravity because it can be sorted by centrifuges or similar. In my opinion, you're a bit more question marky on that.
I'm question marky on most of that, but we won't know until we're out there and somebody's struggling with it.
Yeah. Anyway, Goldilocks zone, as usually described, that is for life to appear, not for life to be able to survive. We are likely able to survive way out of the traditional Goldilocks zone as long as there are resources, energy, and yeah, well, that's mainly it. And not too extreme environments such as too high gravity. I don't think we can sort that.
Well, we could too high gravity with orbital, right? And then,
But
like we
then you
said,
aren't in the too high gravity.
well, it's the same for anything. You can solve it by either orbital settlements or by spinning it up. But you're right. If it gets to a little bit above 1G on the planet, which I don't know if we have any body, any solid body in the solar system where the surface gravity is over 1G.
Venus? No, well, that's the pressure that is difficult on Venus. Yeah. Okay,
Yeah.
pressure. Venus is difficult for many reasons, but
Well,
let's
but
save that for another topic.
but gravity is about Earth because it's an Earth-sized planet.
Yeah,
So,
yeah,
yeah, pressure, temperature, corrosiveness, that's all the
yeah. No,
problem with Venus.
it's
Yeah, kind
being,
of hard to
yes,
build a settlement. And if you are going to build a settlement and it's a nice floating one, then just don't put it deep, and then you don't have to worry about the gravity.
possibly, yes.
Yeah, because gravity is a function of distance from
It
the
it
center.
is,
So,
yes, but you need to stay afloat, which you can do in Venus, but I'm not sure you can stay afloat as a comfortable gravity on any of the gas giants.
oh, I've seen some studies on that where
Okay.
you up in the upper atmosphere and it's the temperature's nice, and if you have like big hydrogen dirigibles or something, I don't know.
But aren't you too close to the surface if you're so far in as you're in the atmosphere of the gas giant? I don't think we need to solve that problem here. Too much
No,
gravity is bad.
yep, too much. Anything over 1G would probably be difficult to solve for. Yeah,
Good. I think
cool.
that concludes it. And we have a new Goldilocks definition, which is more suitable for settlement than the standard one.
Yeah, I think it's a good start.
The traditional Goldilocks zone is a filter for finding life, not the site survey sustaining it. Settlers need available energy, accessible resources, and manageable gravity. And those criteria draw a very different map. The zone is certainly wider than astronomers draw it. The hot Mercury has water ice in permanently shadowed craters, and cold moons like Io and Europa have available geothermal energy from tidal flexing. If you are interested in where humanity will settle, we will remain in the traditional Goldilocks zone here on Earth, but our rambles will take you further.